some airway troubleshooting today and trach tubes to what you need to know from now, and just some miscellaneous stuff. So one of the things you have to remember is you always need to look at your patient's airway. So as you're going to have this hooked up to a ventilator, and as you're at your vent and you hear alarms going off, you can't just focus on the ventilator. You have to remember that there can also be something wrong with the patient's airway. So some things that will happen is we can get high alarms and low alarms. So low alarms, just in general, to help you understand what we're going to be talking about here, is always due to a leak of some sort. You could have a leak in the circuit with all those connectors that you guys have seen, but we could also have a problem up here with our endotracheal tube. So what would be the most obvious thing?
Cuff.
Okay, what about the tube just being out?
Oh, yeah.
The tube's out. You'll either see it hanging out or you'll see it out in the patient's hand. If you haven't seen them, patients like to shimmy down the bed. They do this thing where they shimmy down so they can get their hands on it. So you have them restrained. And they start out like this, and before you know it, they're shimmied down the bed so that they can do this. And they will do it. Most patients are not out to get the endotracheal tube. Like, people for a long time held the belief that patients on the vent, they're intubated, we have to paralyze them and snow them because they're just going to take the tube out. Well, that's not what every patient's goal is to do. Plenty of patients understand that that's in to help them, and most patients will have at least light sedation on them, but we are definitely going away from heavy sedation and knocking everybody out. What's her name? I just totally lost my mind. Isabel from Woodland is going to be coming in a month or so and talking to you guys about ICU delirium and how we don't sedate as heavily anymore and the reasons why. So plenty of patients are going to be awake and looking at you and trying to communicate with you in some fashion of what they need. Their nose itches or whatever it is. Take the tube out, whatever it is they want to tell you. So you have to be able to work with them as well. So the tube could be completely out. If it is, unless your patient is in extreme distress, and then we're gonna just leave it out. So that's what we do when we see how they do. So they took it out, put them on a nasal cannula, put them on a cam, depending on how they're doing, and monitor them. About 75% of patients who take their tube out can leave it out. If they can get it out, a lot of times they're fine. Patients, especially violent, once they're intubated, are drug overdoses and alcohol toxicity. As the medication, the drugs that they took or whatever, starts to wear off, they're going to be generally going through withdrawals and detox and things like that. I don't know if you guys have seen those patients. Yeah, they're pretty. Yeah, they can get pretty violent. You have to remember that two things. Number one, the patient might be an accidental overdose, or they just were out doing their stuff and they took too many drugs, or a real overdose. They purposely did it. So one thing to remember, you okay over there? About drug addicts is sometimes you'll see them more than once in your hospital or in your emergency room. It's sad to see somebody that's so that addicted that they keep doing it and they keep ending up and they're ruining their body and they're going to die young. But don't judge. You guys don't know the situation. A lot of people in the hospitals, you'll see judge patients based solely on why they're there and what their history is, and you know that they're a repeat drug user and things like that. Our job is not to judge you guys. Our job is to take care of the patient. So a lot of patients that are drug users have no way to stop. There's no place. Do you guys know anything about places that are available for them? They're very minimal. It's not like people can just check themselves in for treatment. It's very hard to find treatment. And it's very, once people get those addictions, meth and heroin and all that, they're terrible. That's why you need to stay away from them, because they're very hard to overcome. So again, don't judge. Your job is there to take care of your patient. So the tube can come out. Also, so the cuff could go bad, of course. So you put air in your cuff and it just deflates again. You keep putting air in and it deflates. That's a cuff that's gone bad. That is an ET tube that's going to have to be replaced. And again, that's what we talked about the bougie for. So the bougie, or remember, we call it the endotracheal tube exchanger on your chest, has a curved end here. That's the end that's going to go in first. And some of them have markings. This one's kind of worn off. And then all you're going to do, if you're going to replace the tube, is put this in. And then we would take the old tube out and then put the new tube on top of it. It's too hard to do with this mannequin. Yes?
When do you stop? Until you
well, you have to figure that these tubes go to about 28, and then this would be 30, 32, 34, probably about 36 or so. Yeah, this one's just all worn off.
So it's written the.
It has numbers on the side,
Okay.
just like a stylet does. I mean, like an ET tube does. So usually about like that. If you can imagine the length of the ET tube, and you want it to be a little bit at the end of that, and then take this tube out, the bougie stays in place, and you put the new tube over it, and then pull this out. At what point do we talk about this? No, I can't because I don't know what it is. You have to talk about it. I haven't used it before.
It's called a Cook's catheter, and it's an alternative to kind of the bougie. The nice thing about it.
You guys let Sharon know over there. I haven't used this one before, so she's familiar with it.
So I don't want to.
No, we can take it out. That's what we have it for.
So a lot of times when the doctor will ask, they'll just say they need a Cook's catheter.
A
And
what?
it's a Cook's.
Cook.
Like
Yeah,
a cook in the
like a-
kitchen.
Okay.
Cooks.
And this is another one that you can use to give you a guide to put an ET tube in, but you probably can't see, but it has a hollow inside and it has a little port down here at the end. And you can connect a little piece.
Here, I'll get that.
You can connect a little piece and actually connect oxygen tubing to it. If for some reason the doctor can only get this in, you could still use this to ventilate your patient. So it'll be able to either go down through the ET tube, right, and they could pull the ET tube out, and now at least I have a pathway, and I have a way to bleed in oxygen. So, yes,
Work this good?
it actually works better, because a bougie is just to change out the ET
So I
tube.
mean like oxygen wise?
Yeah,
Is this the?
you would put it on here, and you can bleed in your oxygen. So if you hear a doctor say, I need a Cook's, this is what they're talking to. Some hospitals, they're kind of like, once again, trying to find gold in the hospital. They might keep them in the OR, they might keep them in a special procedure room. They kind of keep them hidden, but that's what this is. So the advantage is you can still oxygenate or ventilate and leave this in. If you get a doctor who just can't intubate and maybe they're calling for an anesthesiologist or they're trying to come up with a plan B, this at least you can leave in and still be providing oxygen while you're waiting for a better airway.
What did they do with that?
This would go on the end of the ET tube, I think. Or it could replace it. This I don't know.
Looks like it goes on the lid, top.
Looks like it goes on the end of that, but you couldn't.
And that, the oxygen will hook on the vent.
No, that would
This
be
looks
like,
a 15.
it's a 15 millimeter adapter,
So
but I
could you use
can't.
that to that? Or what? There you go. Goes up, so we switch it out. I don't know, this I'll have to look up. and
Yeah, we'll have
what
to
it is.
see. Cause I don't think, I don't think you could bag through that narrow.
You can try.
Yeah, we could try. That would go there.
Jeremy, lay down, we'll try.
Yeah, maybe you can.
Oh, yeah. I guess you could get,
Wow.
oh, yeah.
It's multi.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can actually bag, oh! Now you're gonna hear about that till you graduate. So you can actually bag through it. So let's put it back in and see if it's, like, obviously it wouldn't be in the ET tube, but we're not gonna get it in another way right now. So, cause that's definitely a 15 millimeter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it
Oh yeah,
it
you could
looked
just
like.
provide some ventilation through it. How about that?
Ooh.
Learn something new every day.
And this is another one that you're gonna probably hold on to, because you can imagine as the doctor's trying to advance it, he could be shoving other things down, because it's gonna take some force to push it through, so sometimes you just kinda hold on to it loosely.
We'll have to rubber band those on there or something, or they're gonna get lost, these little pieces. Yeah, I actually had a student bring this because they were like, we were using this and I didn't know anything about it. And I said, that's because I've never seen it. New stuff we learn about together. So, all right, cool.
Thank
So
you.
that's the cook's Airway.
I'll just hide over here.
So blown cuff. Now we also can have a pilot balloon go bad. So if the pilot balloon goes bad, and actually people have accidentally cut the pilot balloon. Like nurses are doing something with dressings or something up here and the pilot balloon just gets cut. So
Or the patient bites through the pilot line.
yeah, they can bite through it too. So now, or you might, if you have no way to put air in. So they make a pilot balloon repair kit, but the chances of having that at your side when you need it are very rare. So you also can use a syringe and a pair of hemostats, and I've had students who have actually done this. I'm just using an ABG syringe for right now. You need a very small syringe, like a 24 gauge. Yeah, and so what you can do is we can use this to put air in the cuff. This is a kind of a big pair, but we're gonna use it for something else too, but you need a pair of hemostats, which are the little clamp ones.
Right.
They have the grippy things on the end, and you clamp them in place to hold something. So what we're gonna do is insert air in, clamp it off, and then that can hold air into the cuff until you have time to replace the endotracheal tube. So it works very well, so it's effective. And people have done it, and so have students. They're like, the RT will be like, the pilot balloon, something's wrong with it, or it's cut off, and they'll forget because you don't do it very often. The students will be like, I know what we can do, and it'll help until you can get things done. So insert.
You have to have good eyes. So no.
Yeah, and you have to have a very small gauge needle to do this.
I would love to do that.
So there we go. We got it in. Whoops, and we poked a hole in it. Ta-da! Do it. Just do it again. Yeah. Now I'm in. So now, yeah, we're gonna clamp down here anyways. So I can put my air in to my cuff, and then I can clamp it off until we can get something else done with the tube. So if your patient is going to be extubated soon, like say that just happened the morning and your patient's going to be extubated that day, you're not going to replace the endotracheal tube. You'll just leave it until the patient's extubated. If not, though, that gives you time to put in a new tube with your bougie. Take the old tube out, put the new one in without a lot of trauma or to do. Okay? So that's how we can take care of a pilot balloon. The other thing that can happen, so that would all cause low pressure problems. High pressure problems would be some kind of obstruction or blocking the path of the air getting into the patient. So the ventilator is going to try to keep pushing the air through, which makes the pressures go up. So a high pressure alarm would be some kind of obstruction. If you're doing a bronchoscopy with a patient that's intubated, that's going to give you high pressure alarms because you're going to have the scope through the tube. And the smallest size tube the patient can have is a 7 if you need to have a bronch. Anything smaller, the bronch won't go through, the scope won't go through. It's not typical.
So the ET tube, the smallest is a 7?
Yes.
So the bronch won't go through anything?
Like a 6.5.
Okay.
Yeah. Typically our adult patients don't have 6.5 tubes in, but you still need to know that 7, it has to be a 7 or greater to be able to do a bronch for an adult patient. So doing a bronchoscopies, you're going to have high pressure alarms going off. If your patient has secretions in the tube, you're going to have high pressure alarms going off. Mucus plug. Patient's got very thick secretions. Maybe, I hate to say it, but sometimes you come off of night shift. the night shift therapist, you're coming on to report for day shift, you come in and all the humidifiers are dry. Actually had students tell me about that. So like we came in, nobody had replaced the humidifiers, they had run dry, and all the patients had very thick, tenacious secretions, and some of them were starting to plug up, so it was a big mess. So that's not good practice either, to not take care of your humidifiers. They always need to contain water. So that's where I was talking about yesterday, where you can bag and lavage the patient. So you're gonna put saline directly down the endotracheal tube. Remember, we don't do this on the test, but we do it in real life. So we have to cover both ways. You're gonna dump saline down. You can either saline bullets, but the easiest thing is some RTs will just carry, you can get a 10 cc syringe and it's already pre-filled with saline. And you just take that and you're gonna squirt it down the endotracheal tube, and then you're gonna bag. And this is where you really have to bag. You don't need to bag a patient like this normally. And I'll see some people be like, ooh, I'm saving a life, yay. All right, you're given, look how much, that's like 800 cc's of tidal volume, one of these. So normally we don't need to do that. But if we're trying to break up secretions or a clot, we do need to do that because all of your force is gonna be used to try to break it up. So put the saline down, bag hard. You'll hear it break up if it's effective. It's very effective, it's why we do it. So patients with heavy secretions, or if you're trying to break up that clot, that mucus plug that's in there, bag it down with saline, and hopefully that you're gonna break it up and can start to suction and get that clot, the plug relieved. If you can't, so let's say you come in, you've got an obstruction, you can't clear it, technically you need to try to pass a suction catheter. So try to see if you can get your Ballard down. If you can't, then you have to extubate for the boards. You're gonna extubate your patient. So you come upon a patient, it's like they got a plug in there, we can't get them ventilated. Try to pass a suction catheter, the suction catheter won't pass, then you have to take the tube out and extubate the patient. A bougie won't work because you couldn't get a suction catheter down, so a bougie is not gonna go down either. So you take the whole tube out and you're gonna have to re-intubate the patient. If it's clinically, you can bag and lavage. If that still doesn't work, then you take the tube out. You'd have no choice.
So if you're having trouble with the secretions, this saline didn't, well, this is board wise. You can retube them without a doctor's orders, or after you get retubed?
We're gonna take the tube out, you're gonna call for help, and then they're gonna get re-intubated.
Okay.
You have to extubate because at that point, it's the patient's life.
Right.
They're gonna die. So it's different than extubating because they're ready to come off the vent. This is take the tube out because you have no way to ventilate.
What would be the point of re-intubating?
Because the patient was ventilated to begin with.
No, I mean like, you say secretions, excess secretions, and you'll extubate. What's the point of extubating it?
No, I said if you have a plug that you can't clear, you can't ventilate your patient.
So what's the point of extubating? Just
To give them an airway again. So,
How does it help?
where is it plugging it? Is it plugging it?
oh, in the tube. It's in the tube.
Oh, inside the tube?
So actually inside the tube. So I have secretions blocking the tube. I have my vent circuit hooked up to it. We're getting high pressure because we can't, because there's a plug. Let's just say it's right here. There's a big old loogie. And it's stuck in there. And it's hard and it's just blocked up. Well, some patients have crazy amounts of secretions, you guys. You have no idea what you're... Huh? Oh, okay. All right. Story. Yeah. So they have crazy amounts of secretions, some patients. Some patients have hardly any. So this patient has it so much and it's so blocked up, it's now blocked off the endotracheal tube. So you can't ventilate, you can't bag, which means your patient can't breathe. So you have to take the tube out. Clinically, you're going to try to bag and lavage with saline first. And if that doesn't work, you take the tube out. The boards, you just take the tube out.
And for your tests?
The tests are boards.
Okay.
So if I wanted something clinically, I would say so. Like say if you're in the clinical environment, but otherwise everything is boards related. So, but you guys have to know for the real world how to take care of this too.
So you couldn't stick like the stylet down there and try and like
No.
break it up?
Hold on, like Ruby yesterday trying to open a package. I'll save you, Mr. Joe. Did you have another question?
I don't know anymore.
Okay, so clinically, we have an obstruction, we try to pass a suction catheter, we can't, we try to bag in lavage, and it still doesn't break it up, then we take the tube out. When we take the boards, we have an obstruction, we try to pass a suction catheter, it won't pass, then we take the tube out. There's no bagging and lavaging, okay? Everybody got that?
Right.
When you take your boards, you never put saline down the endotracheal tube. In the real life, you do. Okay, Sharon has a story.
There was one